This is going to be a very special episode of Rain Race. We have sports car driver Dion von Moltke joining us for this episode. He's going to be answering some questions. We also have Kyle Cuthbertson, who is the usual co-host of this program. And also I invited along my friend Kevin Rollins, who is pretty much the biggest sports car expert I know. Felt appropriate to have him in this episode. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Welcome to a special episode of the Rain Race podcast. We have sports car driver Dion von Moltke in the call with us. He has won the 12 Hours of Sebring. He's won the 24 Hours of Daytona. And he's in the call for us right now because he's going to be talking about his racing career. And later on, we're going to be promoting his new Racers 360 website and YouTube channel. Actually, is it a YouTube channel or is it just videos on the website through like its own service? Because I never really...
So actually, right now we're just on YouTube, but we have our own website. We're going to build out actually a whole webinar section. We're going to build out premium videos. So it's primarily on YouTube, but we're going to go to, all sorts of different things in the future. But thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it, guys.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be going over that later. I highly encourage that you stick around for that because whether you're a racer on sim racing or you're out karting or you're just trying to get your career started in maybe like a Mazda MX-5 Cup, I mean, he has some really good racing tips and he's an experienced guy, obviously. So hopefully his videos and blog can help you in your racing career. But anyways, we're going to start off here by going over your racing career because you started back, I don't even know how long ago, but you started quite a while ago in karts actually, which is funny because Kyle in the call here is also a kart racer right now.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I started, it sounds weird to say, but I started really late. I started when I was just before I turned 14. I had a few teammates. I was actually teammates with Gabby Chavez and Pietro Fittipaldi and Enzo Fittipaldi on a team. And I think Pietro was like 8. His brother was 4. Gabby was, I think I'm 3 or 4 years older than Gabby. So I think he was 9 or 10 when he started. So give you an idea of how young some of these kids start.
Yeah, I started when I was 4 years old actually in kid karts and still racing karts to this day. Yeah, I saw on your karting stuff, on Wikipedia, because I'm doing a little research. I saw was a Florida WKA coast races, like WKA races, because that's the one name I recognize, WKA.
When I was really heavily in the karting, like years 2, 3, 4, I think I did 4 years or so. There was a kart named Easy Kart, which was a tag, which means touch and go. And actually, funny enough, Juan Pablo Montoya's dad was kind of the creator of that, and it was wide. So we raced in that in the WKA. And when I was really heavily, it was Stars of Karting, which is the major national series. They had a couple world champions in Easy Kart as well. So that was the main thing. And then at the end of it, I got the opportunity to do ICA, which is direct drive. On those engines, we get up to 20,000, 22,000 RPM. That was so cool.
Yeah, man, I've been doing the road racing side of it for a while, which is racing at Mid-Ohio and Daytona and all the big tracks that you'd race in any other series. And I've done some sprint racing as of late, and the 125cc shifters and 80s shifters. So it's just been, karting is probably the most pure form of racing out there to this day.
100%.
There might be some things going on that's wrong with it, just like every motorsport. But I still think karting really comes down to it's the most pure form of racing that you can get around.
Absolutely. Still some of my favorite memories were from karting and competing then. It's a lot of fun. And the cool thing is, I wish I could go back, and do more of it. I would love to be able to do that. And it's cool when, you have pros that come back to their roots and compete, and everyone can compete against each other. It's still such a cool sport.
Well, because you went from karting for a couple of years, you went from there, and then you did Skip Barber, and then you ended up in the Coney Sports Car Challenge, which nowadays has been renamed and rebranded to the Continental Tire Sports Car Challenge. But just talk about the beginnings in that series, how exactly you went from karting to Skip Barber and then had the opportunity to switch to sports cars.
Yeah, I really am very lucky on when I was coming out of karts looking to go to cars. I was kind of in the last group of the Skip Barber drivers, and when Skip Barber was still pretty big until it started to kind of cliff dive. I did a couple national races in my first year of transition. And, back then it was Ricky Taylor, Joseph Newgarden, Stephen McAleer, a ton of awesome guys. And in my class, it was kind of Jordan Taylor, Gabby Chavez, a few guys a little bit younger than me. So it was a ton of great competition driving those cars. I sucked in those cars. I just did not click with me for whatever reason coming out. But early on in my career there was a decision that if I'd made a different decision, my career would have been done before I even got started. And coming out, there's a bunch of guys deciding between Skip Barber or going to SCCA Formula Renault. And I know if I had gone to SCCA Formula Renault 2.0 or 1.6, my career would have been dead in its tracks right then and there, just because you didn't have the competition, you didn't have the coaching, you didn't have the brand name. The cars were great, but you learned a lot more in a Skip Barber car, and it was cheaper too. I didn't have the money to be able to go. So going to Skippy was a big decision and a great step for me. As much as I hated driving the cars, as much as I sucked driving the cars, I learned a ton. And I just stayed there for a year. And at that time, like any other driver, I wanted to go to IndyCar. But during one of the national races, like you said, now Continental Challenge, happened to be racing there with Grand Am. And I remember being up in the stands with my dad, and he was kind of saying, look, if you want a career in this is the way to probably go. We can't afford $1,000, which was the next step on Star Mazda. But, we can find some sponsorship and help a little bit and go race Coney Challenge. So immediately I said, look, I'm in. These cars look awesome. So we started talking to some teams, and that happened to be the first year APR Motorsport was looking to run a cars when I would look to run the series. So we linked up with them in the VW GTIs.
I mean, that's a very cool success story, from going to having an almost dead racing career to hopping up into sports cars. And that sports car transition that you made ultimately would lead you to victories, like we said, in the 12 Hours of Sebring, Daytona, some of the biggest races in not only America, but some of the biggest races in the world, just through that decisions that you made back then. Of course, you drove Daytona Prototypes as well in the Grand Am series. We know you best as pretty much a GT driver for those people who know you, but you actually drove some Daytona Prototypes back in Grand Am.
In 2010 or 2009, I drove for a full year in DPs. I absolutely loved those cars. I know they're not very well loved by the fans. They don't have the technology. They don't look as cool. But to drive them, there was a lot of horsepower. The car itself was just awesome. It was loud, aggressive. I loved driving them. And I wanted to stick around, but made a decision to go back to GT cars, mostly because at that point, DP was looking pretty desolate. There wasn't many cars on the grid. There wasn't any manufacturers really interested in it. And if you weren't in Ganassi, you weren't really getting paid to drive. So I knew if I wanted to, at that point, align myself with a manufacturer and become, a full-time sports car guy and really a paid professional, GT was the way to go. So it was a pretty conscious decision to move away from that. Now, of course, at the end of DP, it ended up being awesome. Now it's turned to DPI, which is simply incredible. And I wish I would be doing more prototype stuff. It's difficult AM and GT stuff to earn an opportunity in Daytona Prototype, or DPIs, I should say now. But I'm hoping to do more of it because those cars look absolutely amazing.
So when you raced in DPs, you raced with Doran Racing, didn't you?
So yeah, I did drive with Kevin Doran. Kevin's a legend in the sport. So to be able to work with him for a year, drive with Memo Gidley for half the year, and then have to transition to kind of the pro driver role, it was kind of being thrown in the fire. First half of the year is a great learning experience. And then all of a sudden transitioning into being the main person and having different teammates to coach pretty much every weekend. It was a pretty tough transition.
Yeah, and you were also Rookie of the Year that year as well.
That was pretty cool to be able to win that for sure. I don't remember how many people I was competing against for it, but I know there was a couple guys that were pretty damn good.
And I wanted to throw this little fun fact out there that Doran, yeah, I'm doing my thing. Doran was the first Daytona Prototype manufacturer to win the Rolex 24 overall in 2004, and then the Doran car became Dallara. So
start a campaign, #KevinFacts.
Hey, I'll support that.
We'll make
It's
another
just-
T-shirt.
I get one of those.
What's yeah, I mean, we'll
I've been
hook you up
designing
with
a lot
one
of
if we get it.
T-shirts lately. I'll get it done. I've been designing a lot of T-shirts this week.
Oh boy. Anyway, I do want to go on because after Daytona Prototypes, all right, I'll be honest. I was a lot more of an ALMS fan back in the day than a Grand Am fan. I'd watch Grand Am on and off. But you went to Porsche when you went to GT, correct? I don't know what team exactly, but
Interesting. So I drove a little bit with TRG, which was the Spec 911 class in the ALMS series. So it was all Porsches. So I did that for a season. I went and did the Audi with APR, and that's the year that I drove for Alex Job for the first time at Sebring, and we won Sebring in the battery tender car. And that led to kind of the Alex Job Audi ride in Daytona, where we won the next year after that.
And when you won at Daytona, you was partnered with somebody who would go on for LMP1 fame by the name of Felipe Albuquerque.
Jarvis of LMP1 fame and now LMP2 fame, and Eduardo Mortara, who's a multi-winner in DTM. So I had some pretty cool teammates.
Yeah, and, you know, I remember that because it came down to a fuel mileage race between like 3 Audis.
It was Marcus Winkelhock, Rennie Rast, and Philippe Albuquerque at the end there. And Marcus Winkelhock ran out of fuel with, I think, half a straightaway to go, and we ended up winning by 1.4 seconds, I think was the final gap. So it was last 2-3 hours were just nerve-breaking. We were trying to do the math when we knew we had to pit, and we're like, oh man, we're not going to even finish on the podium. And then all of a sudden Philippe came out of the pits, and we're like, oh god, we're horrible at math, we're in the lead right now, what's going on? And he was able to hold it off with an amazing stint. We were battling gearbox issues as well. So it was 25 years right then in those last 3 hours.
And I think that this is kind of a cool title to put on you, is that you were the last Grand Am GT class or Rolex 24 class champion in the Grand Am era.
Absolutely. We that was a really cool honor. It was the 51st Rolex at Daytona 24, I think, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
That was special. I still get goosebumps thinking back to that and how amazing that was. And of course, you know, this year with Philippe winning overall, that was really cool to see. You just racing the 24-hour together makes you pretty close, but when you win it, you guys become really close. So we're all still really friends with each other. And you know, I went and did a DTM test at the end of 2016, and Edo was there with Mercedes, and he came over and checked in, which was really cool of him. And I still see Philippe and Ollie quite often, and we still talk every once in a while on WhatsApp. So they're still, you know, great guys as well as great drivers.
And I believe Edo is now racing, I'm probably butchered that, I'm sorry, but he's racing Formula E now as well, I believe.
Absolutely. He almost won his first race in the Formula E series too.
I watched that, and I still think that the ending was crap with Daniel App getting disqualified, but I know me and Chris are Audi sport fanatics, so...
You guys are good guys, apparently.
Oh, let's go. But I want to go on too, because you've won Daytona, you've won Sebring, so the only race in the sports car Triple Crown that you haven't won or attempted yet is Lamar. So have you had your sights set on Lamar before?
Trying so hard to get over there. Nothing's aligned properly. In this sport, your stars really just need to align. You know, at this point, I'm just trying to get back into a full-time ride, whether it's in Continental Challenge or wherever. I love to race. If I could go to Le Mans and win at Le Mans, that would be an absolute dream. Whether or not that'll ever happen, I don't know, but I can promise you guys I'm working hard every day to hopefully make that happen. I've been a little unfortunate with timing. I'm driving with the Lizards, and my teammate was Seth Nyman. And my first year with them, they went over to Le Mans, but they took Spencer and they took another customer from the other team. So that meant there was no spot for me. And I thought that was probably going to be the year to get the opportunity. And then, unfortunately, soon after that, Seth stepped away from driving, and that kind of changed the landscape of Flying Lizard, where I was really hoping to be for a long time. I thoroughly enjoyed working with them and working with Seth. That happens. There's been talks, but to be honest with you, it's not been anything really close. More than any other track, it seems that teams put a ton of weight on prior experience. So unless you come in with money, it's very difficult as a first-timer to find a ride there because you haven't had the opportunity to get some laps. And there's limited track time. It's a long lap. So that's why teams put, I would honestly say, too much emphasis on it. But it's difficult for any new driver that's not bringing funding or sponsorship themselves, that's actually a paid professional, to find an opportunity there for the first time, especially being an American.
So we left off with Grand Am, obviously, in your full-time season. After 2013, the sports car merger between the ALMS and Grand Am happened, and that left you with a ride for Flying Lizard Motorsports in an Audi R8 LMS.
Yep, and that was our first year when really the Lizard switched away from Porsche, went to Audi, which I know surprised a ton of people. And I drove with Seth Nyman there, and we started off really strong with 3 top 5s back to back to back, and then just he lost our way a little bit, and BOP wasn't great. So it was a bit of a frustrating year for all of us.
You were a part of the team that should have won the 2014 Rolex 24. You were not on the exact car, but you was in the team. What was that like, being handed the victory and then having that taken away a couple hours later?
Yeah, that was such an awkward, so poorly handled. The incident that led to the on-track problem was apparently the Ferrari that our sister car was battling with really almost took out Marcus Finkelhoff multiple times, smashed him in the bus stop, and then Marcus tried to overtake him around the outside of turn 4 on the very last lap. And it was a interesting move, quite difficult to hold it. And the Ferrari just kind of ran his normal line, didn't leave Marcus room, and Marcus was pushed off the track. Given a penalty for that, I think that was debatable. I can see it going either way. The maneuvers that the Ferrari did earlier in the race were completely unexplainable, should have been penalized right then and there, and he was given a warning. So the secondary warning, I could see the penalty happening. So the penalty came after they crossed the start-finish line. Flying Lizard car was in second. The Ferrari had won, but then they penalized them. The Flying Lizard car went to victory lane. They got their watches. They sprayed champagne. And apparently an hour later, upper management at IMSA reversed the decision. That should have never happened. Whether or not you agreed with the penalty, I can see it going either way. But to go and reverse that decision was just, and you can't quote me on this because I don't know this for a fact, but I think that was one of the major reasons why Seth ended up leaving after that, which was a big loss for the series because Seth was a great person to have there because that was just so poorly handled.
Yeah, and isn't it Darren Law who took his place?
Darren Law is now the team. Well, there's three team owners, but Darren Law is kind of the main guy there now. He's the guy us drivers call to try and get a ride for Flying Lizard at least.
So after you mentioned earlier how later in the 2014 season the pace kind of dropped off. The results weren't coming there anymore. So after 2014, you started off 2015 with Paul Miller Racing. They also had an R8 LMS, and actually you found a handful of good results in the beginning of that season.
Pretty much all the way through until right at the end. I mean, we had a solid lead in the championship, and kind of started to go more wrong for us was at Lime Rock when we were leading the race, and Connor Daly did a dive bomb move on us, or on Chris Haza, my teammate, on the downhill when they were both leading the race, took us both out of the race, and then things kind of after that. But yeah, I think we had 5 pole positions. We finished 3rd in the championship. We had 4 or 5 podiums. It was a solid year, especially losing the Lizard ride because Seth had pulled out and the team now needed funding. That was really disappointing. And the Paul Miller ride came together super last minute. It was after Christmas even that I actually officially got the ride. But also another really solid team with great guys. We were a much smaller team as well than the Lizards. But, it's still disappointing. I'm still disappointed we didn't end up winning the championship. But if you think about driver rankings, that would have probably made me gold, so that might have been a problem. Who knows with that end of it? But it was still a solid year.
And now I kind of want to bring this up as well. Didn't like the hood fly off the Paul Miller car in 2015 at the Rolex, or fly up in the windshield or something?
15, that might have been in 14. In 15, we were in a pretty good position to win, but we actually had a broken shock with 3 hours to go, and we ended up finishing 5th. So that was pretty disappointing. I know we're bummed about that.
Yeah, but I mean, still, Paul Miller, very respectable group, for sure, and now they're over with Lamborghini.
They're genuinely nice people. They look after their guys, and they're a solid group for sure.
So I kind of want to ask your opinion on this. How do you view GTD now that they have introduced GT3 machinery as really the basis formula for their class?
About 2 hours on that answer. I love the GT3 platform. It's great cars, great competition. The issue is costs have tripled in 3 years. So there's not many people can afford to race, but very few people can afford to race in GT now. So you've started to see the grids come down a little bit, and you're going to continue to see that because it's just too expensive right now.
And I mean, it makes sense how the cost would triple because the original GTD class was formed off of the ALMS GTC and the Grand M GT class.
When you get manufacturers really involved, it's going to drive up costs. And unfortunately, that's just gone too far, too fast. And something needs to change. Something needs to be done because it's already become an issue. It's become a serious issue once some of the manufacturers stop spending as much money as they are, which will happen. It's a cyclical business, and we're at the end of one cycle, at the peak of one cycle right now. So hopefully our management and our series leaders are seriously thinking about what to do moving forward before it's too late and it ends up being a reactive move rather than a proactive move. The GT3 objective should be more of a gentleman driver series. What I'd love to see is a focal point on gentleman drivers in the GT3 series and then the manufacturer series. So almost like a two-class GT3 class, one where the budgets are somewhat controlled, one where they're open. Then you get the best of both worlds. That's what we need to have, but I don't think we'll get there. We're too far down this road that I don't see anyone making a serious change because it's been so successful over the last 8 years or 6 years, whatever it's been.
Moving off of IMSA, though, you've had some races in the Pirelli World Challenge Series as well, some GT cars in there. You talked about, when we were talking earlier before this call, you talked about how you took part in the Sprint X part of that championship.
We drove that in 16. I became an official ambassador for Audi of America, and I drove with one of the customer teams with M1 GT racing and some of the Sprint X races in one sprint round in conjunction with doing Stevenson and Magnus and IMSA as well. So actually I drove for all three of the Audi US-based teams that year. So that was pretty fun. I mean, I liked the Sprint X concept. I think it makes a ton of sense. And the PWC guys were fun to go and compete with. There's a ton of great competition there. So that was a lot of fun that year.
You brought up Magnus. That makes me have to ask, what's it like working with John Potter?
He's not what you would expect him to be. He's actually really funny, but you kind of have to earn his respect is the right words, but he wants to make sure that you're genuine with him. And he's very picky with who he goes and drives with. So it was cool to get the call and finish second at Watkins Glen. Of course, we were so close to winning. I think we really should have won that race. The Ferrari didn't really obey track limits, even though we were specifically told to. But also working with Lally is awesome. He's a good dude.
Oh,
hashtag avenge ballast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had Lars on the radio.
Lars is one of the best engineers in the paddock.
Oh yeah. If you take one look at Magnus's YouTube channel, you'll see that they're pretty much they're out there to do a serious job, but they're also out there to have fun. Look at John Potter's Twitter as well, and it'll tell you the same thing. But
yeah, that made me literally just remember that Dion was the Spinder favorite. Yeah, I just remembered that.
Marco Siegfried hates me, of course.
Oh man. Yeah, but moving on to the whole portion that I wanted to talk about here, because obviously you've had a pretty large variety in your racing career, but getting into racing nowadays is an extremely difficult business because number one, you have to have money to do it. Karting isn't free. You can't get out there and make yourself known without putting at least a little bit of money down. And it's not a stick and ball sport where you can hop in like a high school sports team like baseball or football. As fun as that would be to have like a high school or college karting team, you know, any universities listen, just give me a ring. We should start that up. Obviously, like I said, it's extremely difficult to get into the business nowadays. So a lot of people have resorted to sim racing, and I can talk for myself. I'm a pretty serious sim racer. I mean, I like to have fun with it, but I do like to take it competitively. So myself, I'm a part of that. Kyle's a part of that. Kevin does more casually on the side. I don't think he's in any big leagues or anything.
I don't really do sim racing. I mainly just do go-karting for fun. So. Yeah,
but you made a blog post, which actually I recommended on Reddit. You made a blog post the other day about sim racing and, its connections to real life racing. Do you think that it's actually nowadays, in a time where sim racing is so prominent, that it could actually be a means for people to get into a real racing career down the road, like we saw with the Nissan GT Academy?
I think what we've seen with the Nissan GT Academy shows that there's definitely some similarities. And for me, I think it's, rather than talking about car physics, I'll be very blunt and honest, and maybe some people will hate me for it, but you hear about some guys talking about how they do setup changes on iRacing and they go apply that in real life. That's complete nonsense. You can't do that. It's not there yet. But the tracks are outstanding. The car physics just aren't quite there yet, and that's not all iRacing's fault. I don't think there's really any system, and there's a bunch of those motion simulator companies out there, but I don't think any of them, apart from the multi-million-dollar simulators that race teams have built, that are good enough to really give you the feel of the car. But what it does do is your mental demands are very similar. So you're getting a core understanding sort of how to drive a car fast. You understand, trail braking, apexing, the line. You get all of that, and you also are building mental strength and mental endurance. So that's why I think you see a lot of guys that are coming out of sim racing that make good race car drivers, is you have that mental strength that you need, and you have a core understanding, but driving the race car is still very different. What I think will happen is I think you will see more guys coming out of the simulator because I think more and more people are being open to it. But I hope to eventually see, a strong online racing leagues like what you see in esports with Overwatch or Halo or whatever, Counter-Strike, whatever those are. I think you'll see racing teams. So I know even us at Racers 360, we're looking heavily into trying to start an e-racing team as well.
You want to recruit me as a part of that?
Can I
submit my resume?
Hold on. 2018 Toro Rolex 24 C Lobby winners.
C Lobby. Big whoop.
C Lobby.
Hopefully, we're not at that stage yet, but hopefully we'll have an announcement coming out somewhat soon, and maybe even a little competition to try and start some members. I can tell you guys right now, I am heavily interested in that, and I'd love to make that happen. It's just the right time.
It's kind of a good leeway to the last portion of this podcast. Yeah, I know leeways are very important in this podcast, but a good leeway to your website, which we were talking about earlier, racers360.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll leave a link in the description below just to make it easier for you if you're listening on Apple or Google Play. Again, just racers360.com. Pretty simple. Shouldn't be able to forget it. But I was mentioning it earlier. This website is actually not just helpful if you're out there karting or if you're out there doing Skip Barber, Pro Mazda, some of the smaller series. It's also helpful if you're a sim racer like me because, like you just mentioned, it helps you learn that a race isn't going to be won on the first lap. It gets you sort of into that mentality of endurance racing, or even just like for a 30-minute race, you still need to have 30 minutes of consistency. It can't just be one flying lap and, 20 laps of just going off track every time. But on top of that, though, you give advice on trail braking. I actually watched that video. It's a very helpful video. And you give some track maps for people who are out and fortunate enough to drive at tracks like VIR and other tracks in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal is to really, no matter what you're driving, what level you're on, we want to make content that's going to help you as a driver. It is not many people that can afford, to pay a pro driver to come in and coach them. So we want to make that a lot more accessible. So the first thing our focal point is right now is just making as much free content as we can that's going to help you. So if you're a sim racer, if you're a club racer, if you're an aspiring pro, if you're HPDE, we want to make stuff that's going to help you and make a community that's helpful. So I really hope that you can check us out. And just so you know, on the website, there's a contact form, and we're heavily involved on all the social media pages from Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Instagram. I'm out there. I want to know what you guys want to learn or want to ask questions. We want to make videos that help you. So we're out there. We're trying to connect and trying to get to as many people as we can and influence as many people as we can in a good way. So that's where our initial focus is. Eventually, we're going to start building out some proper webinar style classes, start really kind of picking out more and more stuff. And we're using technology in a way that nobody else is to try to explain nuances of driving, like you mentioned, trail braking, that in a way that nobody else is doing, or really giving a way for where you're supposed to be looking, and not using geometry and all of this, RPM stuff here and there. That's not applicable when you're actually driving a car. So we want to make it real and stuff that you can actually apply while you're driving.
And if you think you're going to, forget about the website after a couple days, couple weeks, then there's also a newsletter that you can go subscribe to as well. So get your name on that, and you can just get some email updates every once in a while with these tips as well.
Absolutely. We don't do spam. It's just a once-a-week newsletter, kind of updates with the videos, and a weekly blog I like to write. And, really one of the cool things we're doing, too, is an online coaching session, which is actually with me for very cheap. And that's really, you can make it anything you want to do. I've had a few different sessions where people have sent me their race video, and I've watched it beforehand, wrote a bunch of notes, and I walked him through it as if I was his coach for the weekend and gave him help for, his next race. Or I've had guys that, hey, I'm going to Laguna Seca. I've never been there before. Can I get a detailed coaching session? And so I go through the track. They get a written note after it. We'll send them a recording of our session together. It can really be whatever you want to be. And it's a bit new. Not many people are used to online coaching through Google Hangouts or Skype or whatever works best, but it actually works damn well. And I've used it for a bunch of my clients on the pro side of stuff. So we're hoping that this becomes more of a norm because it's a great way to access coaching.
Yeah, so there you go, racers360.com. I mean, I know it sounds like we're really trying to plug the service and all, but Dion was kind enough to join us on this podcast, so the least we could really do for him is promote his new product as well.
Really appreciate that, guys, and we're not trying to spam anybody or try to get all in front of their faces. We're hoping to just build a genuine, good racing community. You guys are racers, I'm a racer, and we just want to help other people in the sport make sense of it all and make good decisions and not only be quicker on track, but be safer on track as well. So I appreciate it. Thanks for your time on the podcast. It was awesome to get to talk through some old memories and talk some sports car racing, and hopefully we can do this again.
Of course.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to have you. Anyways, guys, we will be back. Myself and Kyle will be back on Monday with a special IndyCar preview mainstream episode.
He's not special. Let's not treat him like he's special. It's David Land, people.
No. Come on. He's probably watching this. Now he's going to be upset. It's just a special episode because we're going to be doing an IndyCar preview for the upcoming season in 2 weeks.
We are going to talk some IndyCar, and it's going to be really fun. I'm excited for that. I was a little quiet during this video. It's because I'm an IndyCar guy. I love sports cars. I know a bit about it, but I'm an IndyCar guy.
I'll just sit back with the popcorn on that one, just see how much I can eat before you stop talking. But thank you so much to Dion for joining us on this episode. It's been a really fun podcast to record. Hopefully you guys enjoyed listening to it as well. Anyways, if you have, you can feel free subscribing to the YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, youtube.com/c/deductiverain. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Google Play, if you're not already, you can subscribe there so you don't miss any future episodes. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you all listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.